approval rating, 47%, is as high as it's ever been, but a majority, 51%, disapprove of his performance. On Wednesday, the president argued his on-again, off-again tariff policy is not rattling financial markets.
There's been a lot of on and off, some inconsistency.
There's no inconsistency. It's called flexibility. It's not called inconsistency. It's called flexibility.
Meanwhile, feelings toward the Democratic Party are at an historic low. 55% view the party negatively, and there's a divide among Democrats. On Friday, 9 Democrats, led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Independent Angus King, who caucuses with them, voted with Republicans to advance a short-term spending bill to keep the government open.
As bad as the CR is, I believe allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option. A shutdown would allow Doge to shift into overdrive.
Now, before the vote, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi released a statement defying Schumer, writing, quote, "Democrats must not buy into this false choice. The party divisions were on display."
Today was a bad day for the country, and I won't sugarcoat it. Today was also a bad day for the Democratic Party.
In this case, CR stands for complete resignation.
I think there is a deep sense of outrage and betrayal.
It's an unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American spending bill.
Is it time for new leadership in the Senate?
Next question.
What leverage do we have? Democrats keep showing up at every night fight with a casserole.
Joining me now to take us through our new poll numbers is NBC News national correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, a lot of headlines in this poll.
Yeah, Kristen, and you get to it. Let's just start with Trump himself, that 47% job approval rating. Two ways of looking at this. First of all, if you compare Trump to every recent president, this point after coming into office, Trump's number here is the lowest, significantly the lowest of any of his modern predecessors, except Donald Trump in his first term. He was at 40% at this point in 2017. So this for Trump is actually better at 47% than he's done. And what that reflects is it's not that he's built a lot of new popularity since the election, but that coalition that elected him, you're not seeing that disappear from him, at least yet. And there's some things driving that. First of all, the mood of the country. This really jumped out. We ask folks, is it on the right direction or the wrong direction? That 44% who say right direction, that's up since November. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, the last time it cracked 40%, you got to go back to 2012. The last time it actually hit 44 or higher, January of 2004. So a lot of this is Republicans, but independents, that number is also up since the election on the direction of the country. Also, just Trump and his base, we monitor this. Among Republicans, look at this, basically 3 out of 4 Republicans say it's a very positive view they have of Trump, not just positive. Again, at this point in his first term, it was only 50. It's just the strengthening of that base, the tightness they feel in terms of their connection with him. And then there's the Trump agenda. There are some popular elements of it here. Handling of border security and the immigration issue. 55% approval. That goes beyond his base, you see right there. You hear about Doge there in the setup. And broadly speaking, the people do think this is a popular idea here. A good idea, 46%. Bad idea, 40%. Look at it this way. When you ask folks, what should Doge be doing going forward? A third say much more. 28% say Doge is needed, just needs to slow the pace down. But that's 61% total who seem to say that Doge is basically a good thing, a necessary thing right now. Where it gets complicated for Trump, the man who's leading Doge, negative 51%, wow. A majority negative rating for Elon Musk right here. Also, federal workers, we just asked folks, do you have a positive, negative view? Much more positive than negative in terms of federal workers. And then for Trump, there is, we say, not slippage since the election, but the warning signs, and it's on broader areas of his leadership. Look at this, and all of these areas you see right here, Kristen, foreign policy, the Russia-Ukraine war, majority disapproval at this point for Trump.
And the economy is a red flag because that's the lowest number we have seen on the economy in the history of our poll for President Trump.
That's right. In his first term, this was the exception. He had low numbers overall his first term, but not on the economy. But the economy and inflation this time, look at those numbers and you look at the mood on the economy. Only 18% of voters say it's excellent or good right now. Our pollsters looked at this right before the election. That number was 26% excellent, good before the election. So it has come down. And then you ask folks a little differently here. It's what is Trump doing on inflation? His agenda, his approach. Are you satisfied with what he's trying to do? 43% say they're satisfied, majority not satisfied. And this is the real warning sign for the administration right now. Independents, basically 3 out of 4 not satisfied with the effort that's being put into the question of inflation right now. You look at things like this and you say, if it's politically bad news for Trump, it's probably good news for the Democrats. They do lead our generic congressional ballot by a point, but they're also facing a very unique challenge in our poll right here. The view voters have of each party, neither is good, but look at the numbers here for Democrats. 27% positive, more than double 55% negative. And we'll just put this on a graph for you in our poll here. This goes back a long ways, and you can see the trend line for both parties. This is what's happened to the Democrats since the election.
That is astonishing, Steve. That's an historic low, right?
That is in more than 30 years of this poll. We've never seen either party hit a number this low in terms of negatives here. One thing to note on this for the Democrats, too, a lot of that negative rating, it's coming from Democrats themselves, and a lot of that is coming from Democrats who say the party is being too cooperative in their view with Donald Trump.
Interesting. A lot for both parties to chew on. Steve Kornacki, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kristen.
And joining me now is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Secretary Bessent, welcome to Meet the Press.
Kristen, good to see you.
It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for being here in person. Let's start off by talking about the big picture on the economy. A majority of Americans say they disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. Consumer sentiment plunged this week to a 29-month low. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs slashed growth expectations. Why are all of those folks wrong and President Trump is right about his tariff policy?
Well, Chris, and thanks for having me here. And look, what I am not going to say that went on for a long time under the Biden administration and for a lot of the media, and I'm not going to point fingers, but they used to say it was a vibe session and the American people don't know what they talk about. And Donald Trump, his administration, myself, all believe that the American people know what they're feeling, and we believe that our policies will change that. Clearly, they are traumatized from what's happened with this affordability crisis that was brought on by the previous administration. They want relief. We've been in for 8 weeks. We are putting the policies in place that will make the affordability crisis go down, inflation moderate, and that as we set the sails, I am confident that the American people will come our way, even if some of the media narrative doesn't.
Well, and just to be clear, I mean, these are polls that are taken 2 months into President Trump's presidency. But let's talk about what happened in the stock market this week. Worst week for the market in 2 years. Does that worry you, Mr. Secretary?
Not at all. I've been in the investment business for 35 years, and I can tell you that corrections are healthy, they're normal. What's not healthy is straight up, that you get these euphoric markets. That's how you get a financial crisis. It would have been much healthier if someone had put the brakes on in 06, 07. We wouldn't have had the problems in 08. So I'm not worried about the markets. Over the long term, if we put good tax policy in place, deregulation, and energy security, the markets will do great.
I hear you say you're not worried about the markets, but nearly 60% of Americans are invested in the markets. That's their retirement savings. What do you say to Americans who have real concerns that their retirement savings may be in jeopardy?
I say that one week does not the market make. As Warren Buffett says, over the short term, the market is a voting machine. Over the long term, it's a weighing machine. And again, Kristen, it would have been very easy for us to come in, run these reckless policies that have been happening before. We've got these large government deficits, 6.7% of GDP. We've never seen this. when we're not in wartime, not in recession. We are bringing those down in a responsible way. We are going to have a transition, and we are not going to have a crisis.
Let me play you what some business leaders all around the country have had to say in response to President Trump's tariffs. Take a look.
It would be difficult for U.S. farmers to try and get through some type of long-term trade war that affects our bottom line.
Building the average house is going to cost more.
I don't really understand the goal or the end play here on what's all trying to occur.
Mr. Secretary, you heard that business owner say he doesn't understand the end goal of these tariffs. So help bring some clarity if you can. Are these tariffs a temporary negotiating tactic, or are they a permanent policy here to stay?
Good. So, Chris, thanks for the question. And I can tell you, so April 2nd is going to be a big day. We're going to roll out the reciprocal tariffs. But what I can tell you, and I would encourage your viewers and the public and the media to follow, going into April 2nd, and already now we've seen some of our most imbalanced trading partners come forward and want to drop their tariffs. So by President Trump pushing forward with a tariff plan, reciprocal tariffs, if you drop yours, we'll drop ours. We are already seeing some of the worst offenders come down. April 2nd is an important day, but I would also tell everyone to look what happens from April 2nd to, say, June 30th as the other countries come down too. And President Trump's created a win-win situation here. Either the tariff barriers come down, the U.S. can export more, trade is fairer. It's always been free, but not fair. And then we, or if they don't do it, we'll take in substantial revenues.
I want to ask you about something that you actually said last week, and we'll discuss it on the other side. Take a look.
Access to cheap goods is not the essence of the American dream. The American dream is rooted in the concept that any citizen can achieve prosperity, upward mobility, and economic security.
Mr. Secretary, are you there essentially saying that the Trump administration is comfortable to have consumers pay more for goods in America?
Not at all, Kristen. What I was saying is the American dream is not let them eat flat screens. That if American families aren't able to afford a home, don't believe that their children will do better than they are. The American dream is not contingent on cheap baubles from China, that it is more than that, and we are focused on affordability, but it's mortgages, it's cars, it's real wage gains.
Do you acknowledge, though, that tariffs will ultimately drive up prices, at least in the short term? That's what economists, that's what business leaders, that's what CEOs say.
Well, they don't have to, because I believe, especially with the China tariffs, that Chinese manufacturers, they will eat the price or eat the tariffs. I believe that the currency adjusts, and I believe if we look during President Trump's first term, that all the other things we do, if we're deregulating, if we're getting energy prices down, then if we look across the spectrum, Americans will realize lower prices and better affordability.
As you know, the administration has been pressed repeatedly on the prospects of a recession. The messaging has been a little mixed. Let's look at some of what we've heard.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition.
There's going to be no recession in America.
Well, look, I think you never can predict the future.
Mr. Secretary, can you guarantee the American people here and now that there will be no recession on President Trump's watch?
Well, Chris, you know that there are no guarantees. Like, who would have predicted COVID? Right? So I can predict that we are putting in robust policies that will be durable. And could there be an adjustment? Because I tell you that this massive government spending that we've had, that if that had kept going, we have to wean our country off of that. And on the other side, we are going to invigorate the private sector. I had a meeting with small bankers last week, and they are ready to start lending. Yeah. And I can tell you that Main Street is going to do well.
So what exactly do you mean when you say adjustment? Could that potentially lead to a recession?
There's no reason that it has to, but I can tell you that if we kept on this track, what I could guarantee is we would have had a financial crisis. I've studied it, I've taught it, and if we had kept up at these spending levels, that everything was unsustainable. So we are resetting, and we are putting things on a sustainable path.
Let me ask you about some of these cuts to the federal government. Obviously, President Trump's been very clear. He thinks that no agency should be spared. A lot of focus on the IRS. How much of the workforce do you think will be cut from the IRS?
Well, again, and Kristen, I used to, when I was on the other side of the wall, I didn't like the term fake news. Now that I'm on the inside, I got to say it might not be strong enough, because some of the numbers that I've seen thrown out.
I didn't give you a number. I'm letting you tell me.
No.
You tell me.
But some very large print media has thrown out big numbers that just doesn't exist. So
what is the number? That's what I want to ask you.
Well, I will tell you that there were about 15,000 probationary employees that we could have let go. We kept about 7,500, 8,500 because we view them as essential to the mission. And, we will know once we get inside. But what I can tell you is that we are doing a big review. We're not doing anything. Right now is playoff season for us. April 15th is game day. And even employees who could take voluntary retirement, the rest of the federal workforce, their date was in February. Our date for them is in May. So I have 3 priorities for the IRS: collections, privacy, and customer service. And we'll see what level is needed to prioritize all those.
Okay, well, we'll stay on top of that review for sure. I do want to ask you about the breaking news overnight. The Trump administration launching large-scale military strikes against Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthis. What exactly is the message that President Trump is trying to send to Iran?
So it's a very strong message and very different than the previous administration. So the Houthis, the Iranians, should expect that this is the beginning. This is not a one-off. And we are doing this because they are blocking freedom of passage for global shipping. And Chris, back to the economy, back to inflation, that closing the Suez Canal slows global commerce and increases inflationary pressure for both us and our allies. So we are sending a message. This is unacceptable. 2 weeks ago, the president announced a maximum pressure strategy on Iran. Their economy is in disarray. The previous administration let their oil exports go up to about 1.5 million a day, and our target is to get it to 0.
Okay. Secretary Bessent, thank you so much for being here. Covered a lot of ground this morning. Really appreciate it.
Good. Thanks, Kristen.
Good to see you.